South Wales. My name is Lydia Tasker and I'm the Head of Public Programs here at the library. For those of us who are joining us here on site at the library tonight, we're meeting on Gadigal land, lands that have been cared for and nurtured by the Gadigal people for millennia, and sovereignty was never ceded. And in this auditorium, we are not just on country, we are deep within country, nestled here in the sandstone of Gadigal land. We recognise the stories held within country and pay our respects to the traditional custodians, elders, past and present, and Indigenous people with us here today. Can I ask you to please ensure that your mobile phones are either switched off or turned to silent to ensure there are no interruptions to this evening's event. And a special hello to those of us joining us online, streaming from across New South Wales and around Australia. Thank you for joining us for this very special event, Finding Family Stories, which we're holding right at the beginning of Family History Month this year. This event is part of a series of panel discussions we have been presenting throughout the year as part of the library's 200th anniversary program. These explore the role of libraries, the work of librarians, curators and archivists, and the stories behind our collections. These conversations examine the challenges, the achievements, the responsibilities, and what the next 200 years could hold for the library. And this event is held in partnership with Schwartz Media. Tonight we get the treat of hearing from some incredible library staff members, as well as an ex-fellow on the work of family history here at the library. Our host tonight is Jane Hutchin. Jane is a journalist, performer and family history buff, which is quite fitting. After 25 years with the ABC, she turned the lens on her own ancestry, creating the theatre production Lost in Shanghai. Jane is the author of 3 books and has written for the ABC, The Guardian, the Sydney Morning Herald, amongst other publications. She teaches storytelling and oral history to family historians with the Society of Australian Genealogists. Jane and our panel are going to have a really enlightening chat tonight, and towards the end of the conversation there will be an opportunity to take questions from the audience, both on site and online, and we're doing this tonight via Slido. So for those of you here in the audience, you'll see a URL there where you can join the Q&A and submit your questions, start thinking about them as the panel are chatting. And for those of you joining us online, there should be a link in the description box for you to submit your questions, so we look forward to hearing from you. I'm going to hand over now to Jane, who's going to introduce our speakers, but will you please join me in making them all incredibly welcome.
A very warm welcome to everybody here. I know it's a little bit chilly outside, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us on the live stream wherever you are. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which the State Library of New South Wales stands. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And it's appropriate that as we discuss the evolution of this library's family history services, we recognise the resilience and continuity of First Nations communities who've maintained their traditional laws, customs and connections to country for more than 60,000 years. So, sitting next to me, let me introduce our wonderful speakers. Michael Bennett, who is the Manager of Research at Native Title Services Corporation in Redfern. He's worked on genealogical and historical research for native title claims in New South Wales for more than 20 years, although I know he doesn't look it. In 2024, as part of the C.H. Curry Fellowship at this library, he worked with the Dharawal elders on the Aboriginal history of Walgett. He's the author of Pathfinders, a history of Aboriginal trackers in New South Wales. Welcome, Michael. Adria, since 2023, Adria Castellucci has led the family history team in reader services here at the State Library of New South Wales. Previously, she worked in rare books and museums at the University of Sydney and the Australian Museum. Welcome, and we're so happy to have her here and, of course, her new baby. Melissa Jackson is a specialist librarian in the Indigenous Engagement branch here at the State Library, where since 1991 she has worked with language inquiries, material and cultural consultation, and First Nations family history. Born and bred on Gadigal land, Melissa is of Bundjalung descent. Welcome, Melissa, and thank you all for being here. So I want to start off with Adria, because Adria's been doing some really interesting research that some of you may have been able to read in the Friends publication Open Book about the library's history in terms of its relationship with family history. Now, the library hasn't always been friendly to family historians, has it, Adria?
No, it hasn't, Jane. So when I started in family history, leading the team in 2023, something that really interested me was finding out what relationship the library had to family history prior to the Family History Service being formed in 1988. So that was when we officially started to support and run it as a designated service. But prior to that, what my colleagues tended to say, those who had been here in the 80s and 90s, was that there hadn't been a demand for family history until the bicentenary, where there was a big push nationally to start doing personal history making. So that was obviously from a very colonial lens with the bicentenary, but it was something that was being pushed even at a government level. There was a lot of funding going in for people to do their personal family histories. So that started in the 1980s, but what we actually found when we started looking into the records is that as early as the 1950s, there was a deficit mindset where people were coming in wanting to use genealogical records or use our records for their research, but there was a pushback from the library itself. The people weren't, when I say people, I mean management, weren't comfortable having people come in and use records for what they considered to be amateur research. That was, and it was a circular from 1970. I found that staff had sent a memorandum to management saying we have enough demand for family history. We want a genealogical reading room. And the principal librarian responded to the memorandum with a letter that said that family history researchers were the bane of libraries and archives across the world.
So if we fast forward to today, family history would be a core element in the library, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So now it is one of our core services. As you can see, we have, you're here for Family History Month, a lot of you, and Family History Month is every August. We run a big suite of programs and events for family historians. We also have Monday to Sunday, from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. We have a designated family history librarian downstairs on LG2. So it's something that now we would consider to be an intrinsic part of our services, and also I guess you can see how we've come from the library being a place that was considered to be only for serious research, and I did find that phrase used several times in some of the records and notes that were going back and forth between management up until the 1970s about why we didn't want to support family historians. It was that our records are only to be used for serious research. In the 1960s, genealogists were actually banned from getting readers' tickets for the Mitchell Library, which continued up until the late 1970s. So from those ideas of what is research, it's very that imperial, based on the British Library, stiff upper lip sort of research, to today, where we think of libraries as they're places for everybody and they're there for every type of research, for every type of use. Yeah, we've come very far.
Thank you. Melissa Jackson, I'd be interested when you first joined the library in 1991. What kind of Indigenous engagement was there at that time? I mean, was there a kind of flood of inquiries because this new branch had been open, or was it just a trickle to begin with?
It was seriously just a trickle of people recognising that there were First Nations people, First Nations staff members. There were, initially in 1991, there was two of us. There was myself and my best friend, Ronald Briggs. He didn't know he was my best friend at that stage. And so we developed this amazing friendship as a result of working here at the library. We started out as library assistants, and that means that you go and collect the books and you put books on shelves. And that gave us this wonderful understanding of what type of collections we have, what's in our collection, what type of books, how to look after them, manuscripts, pictures, maps, all of those types of things, posters. So we discovered what was in the collection by actually delving into the collections. Very soon after, it's like an occupational hazard that you want to find out who you are and, you know, some of the things that you weren't told. So then I started doing some research into my own family history. So that's how my knowledge of how to do Aboriginal family history came about, was that quite by accident. And you know what it's like, you get to a person that you don't know who they are, where they come from, and you dive into that rabbit hole and you just don't want to get out, and you want to find that person. That's what you're after. So being here as a library assistant, I found the various resources that I could use to do my family history and then help others.
Michael, what was it like being a fellow at the library?
Oh, look, that was a fantastic experience, although I might just divert a little bit to go back, you know, about 25 years before that, when I was starting my PhD in Aboriginal history, and in 1997, and you know, I knew that the State Library was going to be a focus of my research. I was looking at South Coast Aboriginal communities around the Lower Shoalhaven, and lo and behold, there was a Aboriginal family history seminar that was being put on by Melissa and Ronald. So I came along to that, and that was like a great way into the library's collections. So yes, look, I went on to my main source of information for my PhD was the Berry papers here at the State Library. Moved into native title and have been using collections ever since.
So tell me a bit about the Berry papers.
Oh yes, look, so Alexander Berry, he was a Scottish surgeon who, along with Edward Wollstonecraft, was given land down on the Lower Shoalhaven in the 1820s. So and they operated, you know, they were given a 10,000 acre grant, you know, a big grant, a lot of convicts working on the farm, but Berry, not necessarily more enlightened than others, but he did engage and employ a lot of Aboriginal people. So when I was starting to go through all the employment records that exist here at the library, at the ledgers, etc., and I was comparing them with blanket returns, they're the lists not held here for the most part, of Aboriginal people who were given blankets by the government, I could start to see all these names of Aboriginal workers starting to appear in the Berry record. So I traced that throughout the 1800s up till about 1900, when the community were moved off the property to a mission nearby. So I was able to get a sense of the incredible contribution that those Aboriginal workers made to it was called the Coolangatta Estate, probably more correctly called Kulangati, down on the Lower Shoalhaven. But there were so many names of Aboriginal workers in their hundreds. And I certainly know now, having worked in native title with the South Coast community, that there are names in those records that the community have been able to trace back and see their ancestors and the work that they did down there. You know, they were helping to harvest the crops and look after the sheep. Not paid very well, absolutely, but they're able to see, and these are communities who are still down on country, to see their ancestors working on that property through the records here at the State Library.
Now, I believe Adria and Melissa, aren't your units kind of in the same, you're in the same nest? Would that be fair to say? So how do you kind of, do you have conversations about, is this for you or is this for me? And how do you get along with that? How do you collaborate?
I was going to say maybe we're different birds in the same nest.
So Kookaburra Indian miner? No Indian miners.
No, I'm an Eastern Rosella. I used to work in the reading rooms before, and then the state librarian, Alex Burney's name was at the time, he said to me, Melissa, you've been here for a long time. What do you want your legacy to be? And I said, I would love to have an Indigenous Engagement branch. And he's got, all right, I'll do that. Not just for me, but because the State Library has so many items, so many things for community, so many resources for community. So now the Indigenous Engagement branch sits with the Mitchell Librarians Division. So this is all library stuff. Adria, you're in the reading rooms.
Yes, which is the Library Services Division.
Okay.
So we actually, in terms of the organisational structure, we sit in very different spots, but where I guess we end up collaborating is specifically on that family history section. So the Family History Service in Reader Services is accessible to anyone, and it can be anyone from all over the world, although if you're contacting us from Melbourne about Melbourne records, we'll probably point you to the State Library of Victoria. But yeah, we are available to support sort of anyone with a New South Wales link with their family history, whereas Melissa's service is a lot more specialised. So we will refer people who need specific support with, well, I don't want to step on your toes. Yeah.
Well, I help people find mob, basically. So if there's sometimes it's people who have a gap in their family history, and so they think, oh, there's a gap in the family history, they must be an Aboriginal person, but they're not. And so you have to be, very kind, and then I refer back to the reader services. But I generally do the research. It's done, and I find their person from Ireland or England. But they were a convict, and that's why they were a gap. That's why there was a gap. So, I do focus mostly on New South Wales, but because of the border areas like Queensland and New South Wales, Victoria, we do tend to have a lot of cross-border research, but we are the head office for a lot of missionaries, missionary organisations. So the state of New South Wales is the head office, and so they say to State Library New South Wales, do you want our records? And we say, yeah, sure, we'll have your records. And so we have all of these missionary records, these birth, death and marriage records, missionary magazines, photographs, maybe even a map or two that relates to the mission. And so they're the sources of information. That's where I go for research, and that can be Australia-wide. We have Northern Territory information requests because the missionaries were up there. So it's all over Australia.
Oh, and I was just going to add, so I guess one thing is that, as Melissa said, if people don't have an Indigenous connection, they'll be referred back to reader services, but also sometimes people... Oh, there's my baby. Sometimes there will be someone who is at the start of their family history journey as well, and we work with Melissa and her team that they've actually helped us to create a bunch of beginners resources that we can assist with. And so Melissa also provides training to our staff and reader services on how to do, I guess, beginners Aboriginal family history, so that if you're at the start of your journey, our team is able to help. And then once you've hit the place where you've hit that roadblock where you need to go into those really specialised resources, then that's when we'll send you back to Melissa.
It's called Tracing Ancestors. And this is my my plug for my talk on the 29th of August out at Liverpool Library. So if you want to book yourselves in for that, if you have some Aboriginal family history.
Michael, you have, all your career really, have worked to overcome the great Australian silence, as Bill Stanner put it. In your work with native title, there's this, well, it's more than a crossover. Genealogy and native title are inextricably bound, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, look, very much so, Jane. So, look, the native title system, it's a federal court system stemming from the Mabo case in the early 1990s. One of the requirements for a successful claim is the claimants have to show that they're descended from the ancestors who were occupying the land when the white fellas came to steal it 200 years ago. So the way that sort of genealogy works is that you sit down with the families, you sit down with the elders, and you record their knowledge, and then you have to, I guess, supplement that too with documentary research to be able to push back to that time when the land was first taken. So particularly in New South Wales, of course, it's the site, the first colonial site. Although, of course, New South Wales wasn't occupied by colonists. It was a progressive. It happened progressively. So in Sydney, of course, it's 1788. You go out to Broken Hill. It's not till a bit later. But certainly that places a lot of burden. Native title places a lot of burden on the community themselves because they're having to prove who they are. So I guess from the research point of view, if we can be able to access some of the colonial archives, of course, sadly, there are not many historical documents that reflect Aboriginal people's views themselves, although the library does hold, one comes to mind is Mary Jane Kane from Coonabarabran, a very important ancestor for Gimilari-speaking peoples around Coonabarabran, born in the 1840s. She later wrote her reminiscences, of which the library has a copy, and she's talking about her experiences on the land. She's recording language words and identifying family as well, talking about her husband and where he came from and some of her children and other family members too. So that's very rare, and that's absolute gold. But for the most part, we're looking into, as Melissa said before, other colonial records, whether it's and I talked before about pastoral records, but church records too are very important to be able to build that picture and trace the families generation by generation back as far as we can.
What's the most interesting brick wall that you've encountered?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sadly, there are many. I was just speaking to a community member from northwestern New South Wales just the other day, and we were talking about it must be her great-great-great-great-grandmother who is only recorded as Nanny. And one of the difficulties with Aboriginal family history is that, particularly in the early periods, is that the colonists for the most part, weren't recording the people's Aboriginal names. They were recording the names that had been given to them by the colonists themselves, and there's not necessarily a great amount of detail. And you will see names like Nanny and Kitty and Jackie just keep recurring and recurring. So what makes it difficult is to be able to find specific information to link to specific individuals. So I remember saying to this lady the other day, look, like her ancestor Nanny had been listed on a marriage certificate, but you have to be, I guess, realistic and say Nanny was probably born in the 1830s. We may not necessarily find anything more about her, but she's from a part of the state where there were also the blanket returns that were recorded in the 1830s and the 1840s. The library here has some of the blanket returns, I know, for Bathurst, which is an incredible resource for the second half of the 1800s. You see all the recipients who were coming forward to the Bathurst courthouse and getting a blanket, but recording their name as well. Most of those returns are held out at the state archives. And maybe I've said to this lady, we can link Nanny to a blanket return and find out a little bit more. But they're the particular roadblocks that you can face. This is just the lack of information, sadly. That it's part of that Great Australian Silence that you mentioned, that Aboriginal people were being overlooked and not recorded. You've still got to keep digging to see if you can find out more, but sadly sometimes there's just no more records that can assist in doing that research.
Melissa, are there still finds out there in community that sort of open doors to, unlock these brick walls? Are you still surprised by what is out there, what people keep, what people bring in?
I was thinking of one of the unusual things, the things that the places that you wouldn't normally look, and ethnological or anthropological type of records are pretty good for that, for family history. Now, you don't want to know what the results are, because you're measuring somebody's head and their dimensions and those types of things, but you can see the generations, and this person was married to that person, and they had 7 children. One of the really good ethnological records was the Charles Davenport, an American eugenicist, and so he only visited a place called Byrock. And so he measured these the whole community. So it was a full census of the people who lived on Byrock. Very soon after, they were all moved off country and moved to Brewarrina. So from this horrible eugenicist, we have a list of Paddy Shepherd and his wife and the children and how many generations of people who were there on that property. So so it's the looking at places that are pretty unsavoury, but getting the best information that you can find out of them.
Oh, that's fascinating. I wonder, has anybody here done their family history research at the State Library? Some of it. That's amazing. Because I don't know if you knew. I mean, I when I first started off in researching my family history, I didn't realise that the State Library was a place where you can find so much information. And I used to just ask a librarian really stupid questions and things like that. And incredibly, people would always respond. So it's worth a try if you're looking for something, even if it seems a bit left of field, to just, open up, ask a librarian. Last time I came in, the person said to me, "Oh, I answered your question on chat." And so I thought that was a really nice connection there. Do you get some really good questions as well as some doozies, Adria?
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the doozies?
Oh, gosh. Well, actually, just today I went and was walking around the reading room, one of my colleagues said that they were asked to look up someone's grandfather on Trove, and the first result was that he'd been gored in a bull ring. So
who broke the news?
Well, yeah, she has to. Look, we get everything from am I allowed to bring oil paints into the study rooms to, I think, one of the first questions that I ever got asked was in my first week here, got an Ask a Librarian asking me to look up a particular newspaper article from, I think, 50 or 60 years ago about a fire that had occurred. And I found the article, and it had a title like something like, there was this fire at a pub and a man had fallen out of a window and died. And so I just sent the publication details, because they hadn't said why they needed the article. They just said, can you look this up for me? So I sent them the publication details and a little summary, and the person responded and said, thank you so much. That man who fell from the window was my father. And that was the first time that it really hit me that the research that we do here at the library can change people's lives. It can be not just the piece of the puzzle in a logistical family tree where you're trying to find something that's, a few generations back. It can be something that's really incredibly personal to you that, we have people come in who have been adopted and don't know who their families are and don't know where to start. And because, I think that one of the things that I pride myself and my colleagues on is our compassion when it comes to our research, and we're diligent researchers. We'll try and find whatever we can, and we do it for free. It's a free service that anyone can utilise, and I don't think that that's available in many places anymore. So that makes me really proud to work here.
Michael, how has technology been a game changer in the area of family history, and in particular Indigenous family history?
Well, I imagine it's the same for everyone. It's opened up so many records. Like I'm doing some work at the moment with Barkindji people in far western New South Wales, and I was on. Well, I tried to get on Trove last night, but I don't know if anyone else experienced it. It really wasn't working. I put in these requests and nothing came back. So that Trove is obviously a game changer. I remember coming into the library, this is 20 years ago, and going through the old reels of the microfilm reels of the newspapers. And I would pick, I might pick Dubbo, I might pick, a Sydney newspaper, and I would just go through it. And I didn't read everything. I was just scanning for certain keywords like Aboriginal or something like that. So technology obviously has made a lot more records accessible. But what I did last night, I sort of went back, not quite completely old school, but and Ronald and Melissa back in the day themselves had gone through quite a few newspapers and record and other missionary papers, and built something called Info Kuri, which is still there. So given Trove wasn't working, I thought, I'm going to go back to Info Kuri. So
is it a database?
It's a database. So Ronald and Melissa had done what I've been doing and reading through the newspapers and finding names and places and indexing them.
Michael, I'd love to say that it was me, but it was all Ronald.
Was it all Ronald?
Oh,
okay.
He's the indexing queen. He just loves it. And he would go to, he started with the Dawn and the New Dawn, and then he did the missionary magazines, Our Aim, Aboriginal the Evangel. Anyway, I can't remember the name of it. But then he went to newspapers. So the first 50 years of country newspapers, and then he went through and he indexed names of people that he thought were Aboriginal or he knew were Aboriginal, and the metadata that he had collected so nerdy this is, that was so good and so thorough that the AATSIS purchased it off us, and it then became part of the Aborigines Biographical Index, the ABI that's available on Mura, which is the catalogue for the AATSIS, for the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander. AATSIS.
That's right.
AATSIS. We all know AATSIS.
So Ronald was he was his own trove, I guess, back in the day. So
he's amazing. He just he can see through, like you were saying about the articles, about not having to read each and every article. He can just laser into what is the thing about this article, who was the person. He just knew how to index. He's really, really good at indexing and finding, whereas I would sit there and go, will the people be able to find it? If I don't put this search heading in, subject heading in, and so he was so good at just lasering in on what is important about this article and this person.
I guess the other part of technology too is the increasing amount of digitisation that's being done. I mean, there's nothing better than coming into the library and looking at the original records yourself. I get a kick out of that, of getting the big, ledgers or the letters and going through it. But, when you're, short of time, the fact that you can jump online, I mentioned the Bathurst blanket returns from the 1860s and 1870s before. The library, probably a while ago now, has digitised those, so you can jump online and read those. They've even got a transcription as well, so that makes that a little bit easier. So I guess in terms of Aboriginal history, it has made more information available, and I know from working with community, they love that as well, because there's so many keen Aboriginal family historians out there, and they're accessing these records too. Which is fantastic, and doing their own research. And I know at Native Title we end up relying a lot on that as well. The community, they're empowered to be able to go and do that work themselves.
Yeah, we talk about records, and often we've talked about Trove as well. But I'm always gobsmacked by the boxes of, and again, this is all digitized, but ephemera and objects and paintings, and it's not just about the written word, which, when I first came to look at the library, my mind was blown that it had so many. The photographic collection is just awesome. Adria, do you find when you're sort of trying to direct people to find their own family histories that, you find things in odd places?
We found baby teeth.
Whose?
In a box, in somebody's personal papers that they'd provided to the library.
Wow.
Somebody had collected their child's baby teeth and included them in the box. So you might, I'm not guaranteeing you're going to find your great-great-grandmother's baby teeth here. But yeah, you never know where you're going to find things. I guess that's the thing that is why we encourage people to submit the Ask a Librarian request as well, is because if you come to the family history desk, we can definitely show you how to use, we've got things like telephone directories that are all on microfilm that are easy to go through, or microfiche, sorry. There is a difference. And also, one of the things that's a gap is that Trove is fantastic, but because of copyright law, it's only newspapers prior to 1955 that are mainly available. There's a handful of copyright holders who've allowed their papers that are later than 1955, but any of the major Sydney or New South Wales papers, you're not going to find them from up until 1955 to maybe we start to hold things from the 2000s onwards online, but also a lot of the digitised copies, they don't do the family notices. So we luckily have all of that available on microfilm, so you can come into the reading room and order it. So yeah, if we get a lot of people coming in looking for, they know that their grandparents had a business somewhere, but they're not sure where, so can we go through the local classifieds to see if there's a listing for the garage, for example. But Yeah, I think the great thing is that you can find family history anywhere. You might be able to find, we've had people come in and there's been sports yearbooks from sports clubs where they've been able to find a record of their family member, or, local sort of community rags. You never know what you're going to find.
Michael, you wrote a book about pathfinders. Is that the correct? I often think that they must be, so these are Aboriginal trackers who, a friend of mine was telling me how he had a situation some years ago, but within recent memory, and an Aboriginal tracker was brought in to help try and solve this crime. I imagine that they also could solve family history issues potentially.
Well, look, yeah, that's really interesting. So trackers were employed. The Pathfinders I looked at from when the current New South Wales Police Service was formed in 1863, and trackers were officially employed right up through to the 1970s, and they were using their phenomenal knowledge of the landscape to be able to pursue sheep thieves, to be able to find people lost in the bush, picking up on all those little subtle signs, but using their understanding of human psychology as well to be able to track people. One fascinating thing about Aboriginal family history is that within each family and communities, there might be one or more of the old aunties or elders who hold so much information. My boss at Native Title, Natalie, is a little bit like that. Like, she just knows, this person's related to that person, is related to that person as well. So that knowledge is still there within communities, and I'm sure some trackers would have helped that as well. Trackers were put in a really difficult position from time to time, in that they were asked to track other Aboriginal people, sometimes people from their own language group, from their own clan, and they could run into all sorts of problems. There was one tracker up in Walgett in the 1870s who did that, and then he survived but suffered the payback from having broken his traditional law. But other trackers, because they knew who their family was, would lead police the other way. They would say, my cousin's gone that way, I'm going to take the police that way, because they were still part of that society. They were following Aboriginal law. So yeah, look, trackers, they had all that landscape knowledge, but they knew who their community was, particularly when they were working on their traditional land.
Amazing. Now, you can submit questions via the Slido app. We have about 15 minutes to go, and I'm very happy to see that we already have a few questions submitted. So I'll go to them, but please don't be a stranger. Feel free to submit something if you have a burning question about family history, Indigenous history, and the State Library, and how the State Library of New South Wales might be able to help you. So I think, Adria, I should ask you this first question submitted. The library holds a series of records pertaining to my family, the speaker asks. What do I need to do to access these records?
So you go to our website, and in the top right corner, there's a button that says Ask a Librarian. Scroll down, there's another button that says Ask Now. Click on that and fill out the form. Anyone can come in at any time and speak to us at the desk, but particularly with records where you think that you might be finding personal information about people, particularly if they might still be alive, or that there's going to be records where other people are still alive, they may be restricted. So it's best to submit an Ask a Librarian request so that we can just confirm that those records are available, or whatever checks there are. But also, if you just come to any of the desks, the librarians there will be able to help you. But specifically for family history requests, go to the one just downstairs at Macquarie Street.
How quickly can the Ask a Librarian service respond? What's normal?
Yep, so it's up we'll answer within 7 working days for the written request. And at the desk, we'll try and help you as much as we can. If it turns out that it's going to take a bit of digging, then we can also help you to fill out that Ask a Librarian request, and one of our librarians will go into the stacks and do some research for you.
Thank you. Someone's asked about naming the speakers again. I think you'll get the correct spelling just behind me, but of course we have Adria Castellucci, thank you, Melissa Jackson and Michael Bennett. And again, I would say Ask the Librarian is a good service if there's any question relating to the State Library that you want to know about. Now, do you have access, here's another question, to international databases? My great-great-great-grandmother was a Mauritian slave, and I'm trying to find her birth date.
That's a fantastic question. So, we do have access on site to Ancestry, Ancestry Library Edition, and Find My Past. Ancestry has a lot of international records. Find My Past has a really strong sort of English, Irish, Scottish, Wales. But for Mauritian records, I'd say definitely submit your request, because even if we don't have access to those records, one of the things that we love doing as librarians is, even if we can't answer it, we like to find who can. So I off the top of my head wouldn't know anything about Mauritian records, but we would be able to sort of just use our library skills to see who might have those records. The other thing that's great is that Family Search is another big website that a lot of you might know. They have fantastic research guides about records available in different countries, because also a lot of the time, we're lucky enough in Australia that a lot of our records are kept at that sort of state level and are pretty easy to access, whereas you find that in a lot of countries they might be kept at sort of the local council level, and a lot of those things haven't been digitised, so you're going down some real we've said rabbit holes a lot tonight, but you're going to be going on a long journey to try and get those records, but we can definitely help to get you started.
Thank you. Okay, here's another one. I remember hearing about a place, I think, between Nyngan and Brewarrina that had been racistly referred to as Monkey Bar due to a connection to Aboriginal people. Listening tonight, I wondered whether Charles Davenport's presence in Bairock and surrounds was connected to this. Is this something that would be in your remit, Melissa or Michael?
So Charles Davenport actually came to Australia to check out, because he was into like Mendel and genetics in that way, and so he wanted to have a look at some rabbits in Adelaide, which is just so totally bizarre. So he was in Adelaide looking at these rabbits and the cross matching of these rabbits, and then just mentioned, I'm doing other sorts of research. Can I go to a community? And so Bairock was the one that he went to. So no, he wasn't. He had nothing to do with the naming of Monkey Bar. Michael, you've had a lot to do with Brewarrina and around there. Would you know why?
Not off the top of my head. I don't know. I mean, I guess working with communities, when you're delving into a lot of these records, particularly from the late 1800s, early 1900s, there's a lot of language that's used that is, very offensive to the community. And like this was saying before, sometimes, like with Davenport, Norman Tyndale was another anthropologist, an American based out of the South Australian Museum. He travelled right around Australia, recording a lot of information, again, probably in a similar period, with a similar mindset. He did a lot of genealogical work, but he was also taking samples and doing education tests and testing intelligence and things like that. But nevertheless, there's that really useful information that was that was recorded for Aboriginal family historians. But I guess the records generally. I remember in Dubbo probably about 10 years ago, I was at a general sort of family history event, and there were presenters there from the War Memorial talking about the phenomenal records that you can get about soldiers and servicemen and women. But they always were saying, just be careful, prepare yourself. Old great-grandfather, he might have fought in World War I, but there might be some other stories in there that don't accord with, what was told. And I guess that's, many of you would know that's, you have to be prepared to be surprised, and, stories can pop up which don't accord with what you might have been, what you might have been told. It's just part of all the evidence that you have to weigh up when you're doing that family history.
Thank you. I think this is one for you, Adria. Are there still important documents that have not been digitalised that the library holds that are important to finding family history?
Absolutely. So we had a major 10-year project that ended in 2022, I believe. It was a very large digitisation project where they did manage to digitise millions of documents, but we still have millions more documents that, it would take decades for us to digitise. And, also there's going to be things that are more modern that are potentially in copyright, so we wouldn't be able to digitise them, including a lot of the time people don't ever discount like a local history book. We have a lot of the local history books from across New South Wales in our collection, but if they've been published sort of post-1955 or the authors died post-1955, we won't be able to digitise it, so you'll have to come in and look at it physically. So, yeah, definitely worth still looking for things that not everything's online. Yeah.
Would you at least find them listed in a catalogue and then you can know whether they're online or not?
Yeah, so you could definitely find, for example, those local history books, they would all be online. But then it comes down to that, not all newspapers are going to be online, so you might, and you might not know what newspapers you need to look at, because it might not be immediately apparent that a newspaper was published in your local area in the 1940s, but that is something that we can help with.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, so I guess some good advice, if you're, and a lot of people, of course, publish family histories, which are great. A lot of Aboriginal people do, a lot of non-Aboriginal people do. If you make sure it gets an ISBN number, that it's guaranteed to be deposited here as well. So that's, I know a lot of people publish themselves, but they don't necessarily go getting that number. So I think that's probably good advice to make sure that that it ends up here, and then other people might be able to, if you want to do that, be able to look at that information as well.
Somebody asks, and this might be the last question, unless we get a few more minutes at the end, is there any work being done on actively collecting and preserving oral histories so that they're not lost as those with lived experience pass away? Melissa.
Indeed, there's a lot of oral histories, and it is one of the gaps that we have in our Aboriginal family histories, is that oral family history, oral histories. And so I know, Michael, you did the oral history for the Walgett, the Darrow Elders, and so that's just a small amount of oral histories. It's vitally important, because not everybody wants to write a book, so you just you can sit down and record somebody's yarns, and then sort of deposit it with us. We have a large oral history collection, but it's one of those things that we're definitely looking into as well. We have two of our Aboriginal staff members are going to do some training at the end of the year, And one of our staff members is very keen to be a roving oral historian. So she's going to travel around to New South Wales and pull some oral histories together for us.
I tell you, it's the best job. The oral histories that I've recorded for the State Library, it's wonderful to go out and speak to community members, ask a few questions, and then you just sit there and listen and learn so much. So, and I know as well, looking at the work that I've done with native title at times, there was back in 1988, obviously a big effort to record oral histories, but the library here also went out and spoke to Aboriginal community members, and sometimes they were speaking to elders that were born in the early 1900s, and to be able to listen to their stories and that knowledge is just phenomenal, not just from my point of view, but from the community's point of view as well. So yeah, we absolutely explore the oral history resources that the State Library has as well.
And speaking of exploring them, also consider donating them. So if you, through your work as a family historian, have recorded oral histories, we're always actively looking for materials by, for and about the people of New South Wales. So if you would be interested in donating a copy, I'm sure our acquisitions team would love to hear from you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody out there who's joined us on the live stream, we're really glad you're here. Please don't be a stranger if you've got family history questions. You know, I sometimes meet people who say, I've done my family history, it's all done. And I always think, well, which part of it did you do? You know, because as we know, it can go on and on forever. There's plenty more there. So, you know, don't be a stranger. Give it a go. You can just, even as I did one day, put the name of the ship that brought my father's family to Australia in 1941 in the search bar, and amazing things happen. So thank you so much, and good luck, and enjoy Family History Month.
Thank you all so much for joining us here tonight at the library or online if you're watching across the state and around Australia. And thank you so much to our brilliant panel. That was just such a treat to get to learn all of those stories. I've heard some of them before, but I love hearing them again. And thank you, Jane, for steering us so deftly through this evening. I know there were quite a lot of questions this evening, so if we didn't get to your question tonight, fear not, because as Jane said, this is the beginning of Family History Month, so there is a lot happening at the library across August. There are webinars, Melissa's giving a talk in Liverpool, there are lots of things happening, so if you hop onto the website and filter by Family History Month on the events, you'll be able to see what's coming up. And also, I think Adria mentioned this as well, but during Family History Month we have a special pop-up desk in the Macquarie Street foyer where family history members of our teams are available to answer questions throughout August as well. So it's worth popping by and having a chat to them, and they'll be able to help you sort of dig around and find some of the info.
Monday to Friday, 11 to 1, I believe.
Oh, thank you. So good. Thank you all so much for joining us, and will you please join me again in thanking our brilliant panel.